And welcome back again to the Ivory Tower Collections. I wanted to show you the collection's newest vintage technology today. And that is, not this pillow, but that right there. That, my friends, is a Roland MT-200 digital sequencer and sound module. Or to sum it up, it's basically a Roland Sound Canvas SC55 with the capability of playing MIDI files directly from a disk drive built into it. Now, it's not as full-featured as a normal SC55 as far as being able to adjust the instrumentation and effects and things like that, but it does contain the full GS sound bank standard that Roland released in the early 90s, as well as being fully General MIDI compatible as well, and contains the standard 127 instrument sets of the General MIDI standard. So, other capabilities of this. Well, first, let's discuss what it's really for. It is a digital sequencer as well as being a sound module, and what that really means is by being a digital sequencer, it gives you the capability of connecting a external MIDI keyboard through MIDI interfaces on the back. MIDI as in MIDI, our musical instrument digital interface, which was largely standardized by a man I personally met by the name of George Sanger, also known as the Fat Man. But anyway, that's getting off track. So as a digital sequencer, it's designed to plug an external MIDI instrument into it, and by using the disk drive or your computer connected up to it, you can play along with songs or create your own songs and record them in up to 4 different tracks with multiple channels in each track, and then in turn you can save those songs to diskette for later playback or for further editing on a computer if needed. So it's really cool. Now there's all kinds of different types of these machines. This is the MT-200. There's also one called the MT-120, which basically looks just like it, but it doesn't feature the additional keypad set for additional functions that you can change and modify on the 200. There was also one called the MT-100, which is actually based off of the MT-32 module set, but allows you to still play back music files that way. And then there were other iterations as well, like an MT-300 and one called the SD-35 and all sorts. Now, a lot of retro gamers, especially in the PC realm of things, are quite familiar with the Roland MT-32. Now, it was one of the first sound modules released commercially in the market at a semi-affordable price. I want to say around 1986-87 timeframe. It was still a very expensive module, but the MT-32 was used as kind of a de facto standard for all DOS games in the late 80s and very early 90s, until eventually the General MIDI format took over throughout the rest of most of the 90s, with a few games also supporting the GS format as well. Anyway, the MT stood for multi-timbral on the MT-32, but that's not what it stands for on these machines. The MT on this 200 and other machines like it, like later units like the 80S and the 90, actually stands for Music Tutor, because it's designed, again, with an external piano or instrument connected to it. It's also to be used as a teaching guide so that you can learn how to play various pieces of music as you need. So a couple of basic features that you can see here. You have a marker A and B as well as a marker clear. This is so you can set different points on a song that you're playing back, and then, you know, like an A would be like the start and B would be like the end, and then you can repeat that section over and over. You got a volume control, of course, which controls the external volume. You have a reset button, which only resets the current song that's playing. You got stop, play, record buttons. You got like a rewind and a forward button, although it's labeled BWD for backward on this unit. A metronome function. And then you have these buttons here with the numbers. You have an R and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. Technically, you can record up to 5 separate tracks with multiple channels of instruments in each track for playing back compositions. Now, this MT-200 has a 24-note polyphony capability, and that doesn't really mean specifically that it can play 24 notes. It can, But it depends. Some of the notes or instruments that are stored in the module actually take up 2 voices to run. So in that particular case, if all of the instruments you were using were 2 voices each, then you would only be able to use 12 instruments and not 24. So, but most of the time you're going to have a combination of single voice and 2 voice instruments, allowing you anywhere from 24 or 10 or 12 or 16 voices. And then the R is primarily used for rhythms, for the drums, and such. So as a GS module, it's got 317 built-in instrument sounds, and which includes additional sound effects specific to the GS standard. And yeah, so it's pretty cool. Now I actually have a Roland Sound Canvas SCB55. Now the SCB is a tiny daughter card that plugged on top of Sound Blaster cards or other sound cards of the era with what they called wavetable headers on them. And it was a really nice card. I liked it, but I have to tell you that this MT-200 sounds even better than my old SCB55 did. And I think it's because the default ROM instrumentation that's built into this is of a higher quality than what was on my little daughter card I had in my computer back in like 93, 94 time frame. So yeah, so I picked this up for 2 primary reasons. One, of course, was the floppy drive, which gives it the ability to play back native MID files. Now they do have to be in a MIDI type 0 format. It can technically play MIDI type 1, but I've had a lot of trouble getting it to recognize and work with them. So I've found that if I convert any MIDI 1 file to a MIDI 0 file, it works just fine in that instance. Additionally, the other reason why I got it, besides the fact that I can use it like a MIDI jukebox player, and it can be used that way, is also with the MIDI ports on the back that I was talking about previously. Along here, you can connect it up to your computer and also use it as a sound MIDI module so that computer games of the mid to late 80s and early 90s that can utilize general MIDI standard will actually output their music and sound through this module. And I have been very successfully able to get this working using a separate USB to MIDI adapter that I also purchased from Roland, actually. It was about $40. But basically that USB to MIDI adapter acts as an MPU 401 intelligent controller and allows even this old module here dating from around 1992 to interface just fine on my computer, even on Windows 10. So I've been able to use DOSBox and ScumVM with no problem for games that support GS and General MIDI, and it sounds really good. So I've been very impressed with that. I will mention that if you get a module like this, the MT-120, the 200, the 300, and other variants, make sure that they have an auxiliary MIDI input connection on them like this one here. If you only see just one MIDI input, which is common on the very later units like the MTS-80 and the 90S, be very leery, because I found out that if I use just this MIDI input port here, it only produces piano sounds. And in looking at the owner's manual for this, that's exactly what it's for. So if you're only going to use a piano connected up to this module and you wish to just change sounds on just the piano, this is the only port you can use. You're locked down to basically one channel, one instrument, and it's a piano. So games will sound really funny if you use this MIDI input port. They're not going to sound right. You have to use the auxiliary input port if you want external MIDI commands and control parameters to control this module and produce other sounds. It has other features as well. I'll actually put a link to a Techmoan video on the MT-80 that I believe he picked up not too long ago. And because it also has essentially a lot of these same features, and he goes into much more detail about it and actually plays around with them. So yeah, that's my Roland MT-200. It's been really cool. I also have found one other feature I did not know about at the time I bought this, and it's really cool. If there is a file or a particular piece of MIDI music that is in a game that I like a whole lot, but I can't actually find a copy of the file just to put on disk, I figured out how to actually record MIDI songs that are being played back through the module, store them into the unit's memory, internal memory, and then in turn save them to floppy disk where I can then play them back. I actually did this with the song Vampire Killer, while I was using the Sharp 68K emulator for Castlevania. That emulator supports, if you have a GS type module, it can detect it and will work, and this does work even through that emulator. And I was able to record Vampire Killer from the Castlevania game that way, and it sounds great. I'm going to play it back in a video. So with further ado, I've been very pleased with this, and I'm going to present to you a couple of tracks of music, mainly Sega, largely Sega influence, just because I like Sega. What can I tell you? I like Atari as well, but Sega had a lot of good music. And anyway, enjoy. Listen to some music.